Ever feel like you're juggling, I don't know, a million things, work, learning, life, and just wonder how your body is actually handling it all? Beyond just, feeling stressed or
Oh,
focused?
absolutely. That's a feeling I think resonates with a lot of people today.
Mm.
It's just relentless
Hmm.
sometimes.
Well, you're definitely in the right place then. Today on the deep dive, we're exploring something really fascinating, actually. It's an increasingly studied way to kind of peek under the hood, get a more objective sense of what's happening inside.
Right.
It's called heart rate variability, or HRV.
HRV, yeah. Think of it almost like well, the subtle language our nervous system is using is quite revealing.
A secret language, I like that.
And for this deep dive, we've really immersed ourselves in a pretty comprehensive recent review of educational research, specifically looking at HRV.
Okay.
Scientists have been digging into how this measure, this HRV, can give us a better handle on stress and attention, particularly in learning environments. Exactly the stuff that might be on your mind.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which is why we're doing this. So our mission today, it's pretty straightforward, really. We want to unpack what HRV actually is,
Uh-huh.
then explore what the research says about, well, how valid is it for understanding stress, for understanding attention, especially in schools or university settings.
Yeah, the educational context is key here.
And crucially, we want to pull out the key takeaways for you listening right now. Someone who wants to be genuinely informed, but doesn't necessarily want to wade through, dense technical papers.
Yeah, skip the jargon, get to the point.
Right. Okay, let's dive in then. What exactly is heart rate variability? Can we break that down simply?
Yeah, let's do that. So in its simplest form, HRV is just the natural uh, variation in the time between your heartbeats, beat to beat.
Okay, so not just how fast it's beating overall.
No, exactly. It's not about beats per minute necessarily, but those tiny, tiny fluctuations in the rhythm, the intervals between the beats. And here's where it gets really interesting. These little variations, they actually give us a window into what's happening with your autonomic nervous system, the ANS.
Right, the ANS. I've heard of it, but it sounds a bit technical. Is there a more everyday way to think about it?
Totally. Think of the ANS as your body's internal command center.
Yeah.
It runs things automatically behind the scenes, breathing, digestion, all that stuff you don't consciously control.
Okay.
And it has two main branches. There's the sympathetic nervous system that's kind of like your body's gas pedal or on switch.
Right. Fight or flight.
Exactly. Gears you up for action, alertness. And then there's the parasympathetic nervous system. That's more like the brake or the off switch.
Rest and digest.
You got it. Promotes relaxation, recovery, calming down. HRV essentially reflects the balance, the constant push and pull between these two systems.
Okay, so this constant dance between the gas and the brake. What does that actually tell us in practical terms? What does a certain HRV level mean?
Well, generally speaking, a higher HRV usually suggests a good balance within your ANS.
Yeah.
It indicates your body is more adaptable, more resilient.
So better able to handle different demands, bounce back from stress, like juggling all those things I mentioned?
Precisely. It suggests your system is flexible. Conversely, a consistently lower HRV often points towards the sympathetic system being more dominant.
The gas pedal being stuck on.
Sort of, yeah.
Hmm.
It might suggest your body is in a more constant state of alertness, maybe under more stress.
Okay, so consistently low might be a flag, but it isn't automatically bad in the moment, right? Like if you need to be alert for a test or something.
That's a really important point. Context matters. Short-term dips for focus are normal.
Yeah.
It's the chronic low HRV that's more indicative of potential issues.
Gotcha.
And what's really compelling, I think, is that HRV isn't just about physical stuff like heart health or breathing, though those play a role along with age.
Mm-hmm.
It's also incredibly sensitive to our emotional states, stress, anxiety, mood, and even our cognitive processes, like how well we're paying attention or using our memory.
Wow, so it connects the physical, emotional, and mental.
Exactly. That broad connection is why it's so potentially useful for understanding something as complex as learning.
It really is like this intricate dance, all reflected in just the timing between heartbeats. Amazing. Now, how do researchers actually measure these tiny variations? What tech are we talking about?
Well, the gold standard for precision is an electrocardiogram, an ECG. The kind you get in a hospital with leads on your chest.
Okay, not very practical for a classroom.
Not at all.
Hmm.
But that's where wearable tech comes in. We're seeing increasingly sophisticated wristbands and chest straps that can capture HRV data pretty reliably now.
Ah, so that makes it much easier to study in real-world settings, right?
Definitely. That accessibility is a big reason for the growing interest in using it for research outside of labs.
Okay, that makes sense. So we get what HRV is now. Why the specific interest in education? What's the appeal for researchers looking at learning?
Well, think about how we traditionally study things like stress or focus in education. A lot of it relies on self-report, right? Asking students questions.
Yeah, surveys, questionnaires. How stressed do you feel on a scale of 1 to 5?
Exactly. And while that's valuable, it has limits. People's memories aren't perfect, interpretations differ, maybe they don't want to admit they're super
Social
stressed.
desirability bias, yeah.
Right. HRV offers this potential for a more objective physiological marker, something happening in the body, regardless of what someone reports.
So moving beyond just asking people to actually seeing a physical response, that does sound like a big potential leap for understanding learning.
It could be. And like we just said, the wearables make it feasible to gather this data during actual learning activities, not just asking afterward.
Right, in the moment.
Uh-huh. And the review we looked at, it really highlighted two main areas where researchers are focusing HRV: stress, first and foremost, and also attention.
Stress and attention, and presumably how those impact actual learning outcomes.
That's the ultimate goal, yeah. Things like exam scores or how well someone learns a new skill.
Okay, let's get into those findings then. What did the research actually uncover? Let's start with stress, since you said that was the main focus.
It really was. I mean, it was striking. 44 out of the 48 studies included in this big review were primarily looking at stress.
Wow, okay, so that's where most of the effort has been.
Definitely. And they looked at stress in all the typical educational contexts, high-pressure exams, just sitting through lectures, doing practice exercises, but also more controlled lab experiments designed to induce stress.
So they're using HRV almost like a physiological stress tracker in real time during these activities.
That's exactly the idea. It potentially offers that much more immediate picture compared to just asking someone later, how stressed were you?
Yeah, memory can be fuzzy.
For sure. HRV lets you see those moment-to-moment shifts as the learning or the stressor is actually happening.
So what was the verdict? How well does HRV actually measure stress in these settings?
The review concluded that HRV showed, and this is their term, moderate concurrent validity as a measure of stress.
Moderate validity. Okay, unpack that a bit. What does moderate mean here? Is that good, bad? Okay.
It's decent. It means when they compare the HRV readings to other ways we measure stress things like testing cortisol levels in saliva,
The stress hormone.
right, or using standard questionnaires for stress and anxiety, they found a noticeable alignment. The signals pointed in the same direction generally.
So, for example, if someone reported feeling really anxious about a test, their HRV pattern would likely show changes consistent with a physiological stress response.
That's the kind of correlation they found in several studies, yes.
Yeah.
They saw significant relationships, for instance, between certain HRV parameters like RMSSD, which tends to reflect the calm down system,
The parasympathetic.
and how students scored on mood scales or test anxiety scales. So there's definitely evidence linking them.
Okay, so it's not just random noise. There's a real signal there related to felt stress.
There appears to be,
Mm-hmm.
but, and this is important, the correlations weren't always super strong across the board,
Ah.
which really just highlights that stress is complex, right? It's not just one thing. Lots of factors influence it, and HRV is capturing one piece, maybe a significant piece, but just one piece of that puzzle.
So individual differences might play a big role,
No.
or the type of stressor.
Exactly. How one person's body reacts versus another's, or how HRV changes during a lecture versus an exam.
Mhm.
It might not be identical. So promising for stress, but not a perfect mirror.
Makes sense. Okay, what about the other big area mentioned, attention? How did HRV fare there?
This is where things get a bit murkier, actually.
Oh,
Yeah, significantly fewer studies focused specifically on attention, only 12 out of the 48, and most of those were done in lab settings using specific cognitive tasks.
like memory tests or reaction time tasks, that kind of thing.
Precisely. Designed to measure different facets of focus and concentration.
And the conclusion, can HRV tell us reliably how focused someone is?
Well, according to this review, the concurrent validity of HRV as a direct measure of attention is currently uncertain.
Uncertain.
Yeah. Their reasoning was insufficient evidence. Basically, the research body just isn't there yet to consistently show a strong, reliable link between specific HRV patterns and direct measures of attention.
Huh. That's really interesting. So while it might reflect general arousal or stress, which can affect attention,
Right.
It's less clear if it can pinpoint, like, okay, now you're really concentrating versus now your mind is wandering.
That seems to be the takeaway from the current evidence base. It's not specific enough yet, or the link isn't consistently proven.
Were there any, like, intriguing little findings in those attention studies, even if the overall picture is uncertain?
There was one interesting tidbit mentioned. They did find a correlation between HRV and cortisol levels in those attention studies.
Okay, the stress hormone again, which sometimes ties into alertness or focus.
Right. But interestingly, they didn't find a correlation between HRV and respiration rate in those same studies, even though breathing patterns can also be linked to focus.
Hmm. So it connects to one related factor but not another. It really shows how complex these interactions are, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's nuanced, and sometimes the findings seem almost contradictory. It just means we need more research to untangle it all.
Yeah, clearly. Okay, so stress looks moderately related, attention is uncertain. What about the sort of bottom line for many learners? Performance. Does HRV, whether measuring stress or attention, actually predict how well someone does on a test or learns a skill?
This was another area where the findings were perhaps a bit surprising. The review reported limited correlations.
Limited correlations between HRV and actual performance.
Yes. For the studies that looked directly at academic achievement like test scores, the majority found no significant link with the HRV stress measures they used.
Really? No link.
Mostly, no significant link reported in those studies, yeah. And similarly, when they looked at studies assessing practical skill acquisition, the predictive validity of HRV was generally weak.
Wow. I think many people, myself included, would intuitively assume that higher stress, maybe showing up as lower HRV, would pretty directly lead to worse performance.
It's a common assumption, and it's true that excessive stress can harm cognitive functions like working memory or focus, which are vital for learning.
Right.
But the ability of HRV itself to directly predict that performance outcome, like a specific test score, that seems much more complex based on this research. It's not a straight line.
So other factors must be playing a bigger role in the final grade, perhaps.
Very likely. Things like how much someone studied, their prior knowledge, maybe even their coping strategies for dealing with the stress.
Hmm.
Those could easily outweigh the direct physiological stress signature captured by HRV when it comes to predicting performance. Or maybe the relationship just isn't linear, like you need some arousal, but not too much.
The Yerkes-Dodson law, that kind of idea.
Potentially, yeah. It needs more investigation.
Okay, fascinating. So we've covered the main findings on stress, attention, and performance. Let's shift gears slightly and talk about how these studies were done, the methods. Who were they studying? How did they collect the data? Were they following any kind of standards? That stuff matters for trusting the results, right?
Absolutely crucial. And the review did provide some insights there. First, the participants. Overwhelmingly, they were undergraduate students.
College kids.
Yep. And a lot of them were actually in health science programs like medicine or nursing.
Interesting. Any particular reason why? Maybe just easier access for researchers in those departments.
That could certainly be part of it. But what was also noted was a real lack of research involving children and adolescents.
Ah, so mostly adults, or young adults at least. That's a gap.
It definitely suggests an area where more research is needed, looking across different age groups in education.
Okay. And the data collection itself, you mentioned wearables earlier.
Yes, that was dominant. Most studies used either wrist-worn devices like smartwatches or fitness trackers, or chest straps.
Convenient for sure.
Vary. But often, the measurement periods were quite short, frequently less than 30 minutes per session.
Is that long enough to get a reliable picture?
That's a valid question. There's often a trade-off, isn't there? Wearables are convenient, great for natural settings, but maybe less accurate or stable than clinical ECGs over longer periods. The established guidelines often recommend at least 5-minute stable recordings, but longer might be better.
Right. Speaking of guidelines, were the studies generally following best practices for measuring HRV?
Encouragingly, yes, to some extent. Over half of the studies explicitly stated they followed established guidelines, often referencing a key paper from 1996 that set out standards for measurement and analysis.
Okay, so there's some attention to methodological rigor there, which is good to see.
It suggests the field is aware of the importance of standardized methods.
And when they got this data, these beat-to-beat intervals, what specific numbers were they actually looking at? You mentioned RMSSD earlier.
Right. Researchers use different analytical techniques. Broadly, there's time domain analysis looking directly at the timing variations. RMSSD is a key one there, reflecting short-term variability, often linked to that parasympathetic calm-down activity. SDNN is another, looking at overall variability.
Okay.
Then there's frequency domain analysis. That uses mathematical methods to break down the heart rate signal into different frequency bands.
Sounds complex.
It can be, but the main ones you hear about are high frequency, or HF, which, like RMSSD, is often tied to the parasympathetic system in breathing. And then there's the ratio of low frequency to high frequency power, the LFHF ratio.
LFHF ratio. What's that generally taken to mean?
It's often interpreted as an indicator of the balance between the sympathetic gas and parasympathetic brake systems, sometimes called sympathoval balance. A higher ratio might suggest more sympathetic dominance, more of a stress response, though there's some debate about its exact interpretation.
Okay, so different mathematical ways to slice the data, trying to get at relaxation versus stress responses. And how were they using these numbers in the educational studies? Were they comparing students to some universal normal HRV value?
That's a key point. In this kind of research, it's usually less about comparing someone's absolute HRV score to a clinical norm, like you might for diagnosing a heart condition.
Okay.
It's more about looking at the changes. How does an individual student's HRV change from a baseline resting state to when they're in a stressful lecture or taking an exam?
Ah, the relative shift within that person.
Exactly. Or comparing the average HRV of one group, say, students facing a high-stakes test, to another group doing something less demanding. It's the response to the educational situation that's often the main focus.
That makes a lot more sense in this context, focusing on the body's dynamic reaction.
Okay, so considering everything we've discussed, the findings, the methods, the gaps, what does this review recommend for future research? Where should scientists focus next? Well, several clear directions emerged. First, and maybe most obviously given our earlier discussion, is the need for much more research specifically on HRV as a measure of attention in education.
Yeah, the uncertain validity needs clarification.
Definitely. The current evidence just isn't strong enough there. Second, they called for more investigation into that link or lack thereof between HRV and actual learning outcomes.
Understanding why the connection to performance seems weak or complex.
Precisely. Is it really weak, or are we just not measuring the right things or controlling for other factors?
Right. What else?
They also highlighted a need to develop specific guidelines for using HRV in education. The current standards are mostly clinical.
Ah, tailor them to classrooms, different age groups, typical activities.
Exactly. What's appropriate for measuring stress during a math test might be different from a clinical setting. Also, exploring HRV in newer learning environments, think VR simulations, online courses.
Oh, interesting. How do those digital environments affect our physiology?
Yeah, it's a growing area. And finally, they really emphasize the value of combining the objective HRV data with more qualitative insights.
Like talking to the students, getting your perspective.
Exactly. Interviews, focus groups, diary entries, pairing the numbers with a lived experience to get a richer, more complete picture of what's going on during learning.
That sounds really powerful. Not just the what from HRV, but the why from the person.
Hmm.
Okay, this has been incredibly informative. To sort of wrap it all up for our listener, what are the absolute key takeaways from this deep dive into HRV in education?
I think the main takeaway is this. HRV is genuinely a promising tool. It gives us this increasingly accessible, objective window into how our bodies are reacting to the stresses and demands of learning.
Okay, promising window.
Yeah. It shows, moderate potential right now for tracking stress responses in real time during educational tasks, which is
Yeah.
valuable.
But
It's direct use for reliably measuring attention or for strongly predicting academic performance. That's still very much under investigation. More research is definitely needed there.
so it's a valuable piece of the puzzle, especially for understanding the body's stress response to learning. But it's not the whole picture, and certainly not a crystal ball for grades or focus.
That sums it up pretty well, I think. And for you, listening, just knowing about HRV, knowing that your body has these subtle physiological responses to mental effort and stress,
Yeah.
it can offer a new lens, perhaps, on how you experience learning or pressure. It reminds us there's this whole physical dimension happening beneath the surface of our thoughts and feelings.
It really does. It makes you think differently about managing stress or focus, doesn't it?
Oh,
This has been a fantastic discussion. So here's a final thought to leave everyone with. Knowing that your heart's own subtle rhythms might be reflecting your mental and emotional state during learning. How might you think differently about managing stress or maybe finding your optimal focus? Could paying a bit more attention to those internal signals, even without a fancy device, offer a new way to understand your own unique learning journey?
something to ponder, definitely.
It certainly is. Thanks for diving deep with us today.